So as you'll read in the pamphlet, sorry, I need like 1 more inch. As you'll read in the pamphlet, my first major internship was with Dee, so it's actually very fun to be back as an alum and listen to him speak. Because for me, that was really kind of the start of my career. And I tried to really boil down, if there's one thing that I took out of this program, what is it and how has that influenced me? And the thing that I came up with was the respect for other disciplines, knowing that they could do my job and that's okay. And that really came from the process of working with other students in business and engineering, coming from an industrial design background here, where I had never seen anyone else sketch before. And the process, and I think it was phase 2, where everyone starts sketching, was very scary for me, because that's a skill that I learned and I felt like I would be paid for. And so the idea that someone else was going to try it without any training really was a little bit of a threat. And so going through the process of actually realizing that these sketches were great and helpful and pushed the ideas further is something that I still do every day in my career. And I think that that's a really important thing, is that when I work now, I ask for contributions. I'm always open to train, bring other people in. So if there's someone that's interested in another department, I think the natural tendency in at least all the companies that I've been working at is to build a silo, protect yourself, create an expertise, not train unless there's a really dire need. And usually I get in trouble sometimes for like training first, and they're like, why did they have to know that? So I think for me, that's actually been something that over time has only really built professional respect, and is not actually something that anyone's ever like taken over my job for. You only really gain from it. So if I were you, I'd kind of think through some of the things that you learn from the other people in the program and try to take that with you as you go into the working world, because to me that was something that I don't think I would have gotten or didn't get anywhere else. And the work world has only tried to beat it out of me. So, so stick with it. But basically, where I am now is Bmw Design Works, and this is a graphic of who we are, which I find very funny because it's very complicated. But basically, and it does work dimensionally. So if you ask the designer that built this, he would give you this long philosophy about how the orange meets the pink, and if you turn it in a different direction, how integrated it is. But basically, our role is this orange swath is to be the kind of outside global perspective for BMW in a way that the company itself could not do. So we're actually a design consultancy that's wholly owned by BMW, and 50% of our work goes back to the BMW company, and then 50% of our work is for outside companies, so that we can learn and keep our designers fresh and then infuse that thinking back into what BMW does. So we work a lot with companies that seem completely irrelevant, but teach us about the future and keep us fresh and keep our designers fresh. The other thing that this does from a business perspective is allows us to be a profit center. And so from a just very pragmatic standpoint, it's pretty smart and pretty efficient to have your design team making money. So what I do within Design Works is a role called business design. And I think within BMW, it's important to understand that engineering is implied. Because engineering is the way the entire company is built and has run forever. So where we sit is really at the border between the business and the design group. And so basically where I am is at a point where usually there's a business plan and there's a set of expectations for a certain product that are being set by the group within BMW that runs the lineup. And a lot of what we do in design is to challenge that. And so it's a lot of negotiation, it's a lot of program framing, it's a lot of getting the right brief for the right project and building a business case back to say, hey, what if we think about it a little bit differently? And so typically this is something that would be taking design thinking and taking business thinking and collaborating. In our case, though, a lot of the business team is a lot larger. And so what we're trying to do is kind of teach design and make this more infused. So instead of being tested on metrics from the business team, we're trying to build new ones and have them help us. So basically, if you look at business kind of conventions, so things like price elasticity, people will come to us and say, well, we should charge this or get this volume or here are these expectations. And designers usually come back with value-based statements that don't have any financials attached to them. And so they're like, no, but this is the value proposition. This is why it's so important. I think you'll make money, but like we'll work on how. And so what we're trying to do is be a little bit inventive and see if we can blend these two things and invent new types of things in this discipline. So something like a way to measure some of these intangible values. And so basically our group is trying to come up with answers to really tough questions. And so I'm going to go through 3 questions today that we typically tackle that show this kind of interesting vortex between design and business. The first question that we always get is, can you measure it? And most designers will like cringe instantly and be like, of course not. This is emotional. This is like based on color. Of course you can't measure it. And so a lot of what we do is try to measure it anyway and see what that comes up with. And so a good example is a project that we did for John Deere. We've been working with John Deere for over 20 years. And so this is one of the first dozers that we did for them. And you see that it looks kind of like a typical dozer. But from a distance, the philosophy is that a product like this should really be a billboard for the brand. So from a very far distance, as you're driving down the road, you'll see something yellow. You should be able to tell if that's a deer or if that's a cat and why. And so what you see is this big kind of dark black marker line in the middle that like literally came from a Prismacolor marker swathing over a dozer. But you see that there's a difference now between the hat, which is almost like a hard hat, and the base. And so now you're starting to create color blocking. So you have a larger area that's yellow that actually starts to have a shape. And so once you have a proportion of black to yellow, you can start to play with ownable proportions and a sense of stance. And so you start to create something that's grounded or active or moving. And so once you do that, you can actually start to build a language. And so now it's, we've been working with them for a very long time. We've developed the design language of all of their construction products. And so what's interesting is you take this very simple product like the one I showed before, but you start to make rules. So you start to say a certain percentage of this should be yellow to black. A certain percentage of the yellow should stay at the bottom so that the product feels grounded. The hat or the kind of cap of it should feel like a hard hat. And so they're not always numbers, but they're principles. And then those principles can be measured and can be measured against different types of designs so that you create a brand language that's actually something that's trademarkable and ownable over time. Another question that we get a lot of is, can you predict it? And so when you're looking especially at 2 or 3 concepts at a time, the question is always like, well, how do we know it's that one? Can we measure it? Can we do concept testing, which I've done, years and years of concept testing focus groups, but it's tough, And so I think the answer to this is that yes, we usually do know what the future is. I mean, I don't think I would be telling you something revolutionary if I said the future is going to be like faster, thinner, more connected, more global, like that. We know that. So it's always a matter of timing and being able to guess and understand when these things are coming. And so for us, this is a model called Fixstern, which is a German word for fixed star. And so the philosophy is that you set a vision 20 years in the future and then you track it. And you use the tracking of that vision to backwards inform what you're doing next. So instead of taking a product and saying, okay, what's the next natural iteration of this? The idea is, what's your goal? Where are you now? And then you're basically slowly working on closing the gap between the goal and the reality. And so an example of that right now is carbon fiber. I mean, so everyone's working on weightless, everyone's working on efficient, everyone knows carbon fiber is a great solution, no one knows when, right? So it's like start tracking the development of carbon fiber over time, and every year that you're reassessing lineup, you reconsider that option. And so the idea is to build something that has a very clear strategy that then backwards informs everything you do after. The classic example of this from Design Works is Gina, which is a model that came out of our LA office. And this was the vision for Gina. So one important thing about a vision is that a vision is not a concept car. A vision is an idea. And so this was about flexibility. And it was about how does the automotive industry become more flexible, become more dynamic? Do we really have to stamp parts for every single product that we make and then revise them on a 3 to 4 year turn? And so the question was, assessed with fabric. And so this was an archetype that started to take the GINA concept and just play with it. And it's very far future, but the idea was that there's basically a fabric exoskeleton on a body that's metal. And so the metal piece can then clamp down if you're going quickly, or spread out if you're going to, have a cruise on the Pacific Coast Highway. But basically, you would never have to stamp sheet metal parts. And so this is a vision that's yes, very far in the future. But what's interesting is starting to see this change the way that people thought about design. And so this influenced all of the products after it. And that was really the start of flame surfacing, because from this kind of exoskeleton concept where you had the metal underneath and the fabric on top, we learned that you could kind of just wrap metal on top. And so this really changed the way that the team started to think about manufacturing, and therefore think about the types of shapes and forms that they could make. This is 10 years old now. So the more modern version of this is about urban mobility. And so again, I'm not telling you anything new, but the idea that luxury is changing, there's this kind of major shift towards urbanization and this feeling of premium in a very new way that's not necessarily the old archetypes, in the big old houses that it was in the past, is an interesting provocation. And so when we look towards what is the future of that, what is the GINA of the future, it's much more kind of leatherette and urban and a little harder. There's been some grit lately, and so what is beautiful grit, is an interesting question. But a lot of it's really about weightlessness and this idea of shedding away these institutions that have forever driven this part of the industry. So you can see this in the vision efficient dynamics concept, and there's actually some great videos of this online, but basically this is looking at ways of being weightless and doing it in a very efficient and dynamic way. And so starting to really talk about the underbelly of the car and ways that you can really make things move faster and use a lot of carbon fiber to do it. And this again is translating into a car. So the car itself may look very different than the vision, but the idea is that this car is using more carbon fiber than the industry's ever seen before. And that's going to be something that I think really revolutionizes the way that we think about future production. And this really came out of a vision that started with the question of weightlessness and urban mobility. And then the last question that we get is, can you insure it? So it's okay, great, you have a vision, but how do I know that that's true? And I think the biggest thing that is everybody's insurance is the team. And especially with long-term products where you've been working on a vision for 20 years and it takes you that long to actually get it through production. If your entire team changes over, it's really hard to keep the momentum going. And so I feel a little bit like a pro in this because I graduated in a boom and I've been through 4 layoffs and have seen a lot of team changes and a lot of the dynamics that come from it. And so what's interesting is that there's kind of this new dimension of how do you keep moving in a world where lots of stuff changes all the time? And can you create a glue that keeps people there and keeps people engaged and make sure that the things that you're doing are still interesting? And so the glue, I think, is infectious, fun, centered, and courageous. And if you can find ways that do this and inspire your teams to think this way, even if it's a 2-person team, they will be the glue that keeps your product from the very beginning to the very, very end. And so there's 2 examples. One is an internal example of something that was infectious, fun, courageous. And this is something that, just is an all carbon fiber car. And it was for the heck of it. Can we play? Can we see what this looks like? It's definitely got a retro flair, but it's not really based on this is what we're going to do. It's a way of keeping people infected, making people feel fun. It's a courageous statement to the rest of the industry. And it really keeps the team engaged. And these are the types of projects that really kind of pull back and set a glue so that you still have people that are there 17 years later. Another good example is a product that we did for the outside. And so this is Thermaltake, and Thermaltake is a company that does gaming devices, so big computers where you put together all your own stuff. You guys, I don't know that much about it, but basically you're always adding your own drives, and this is the type of industry that's been around for a really long time and has a very inexpensive parts bin. So if you just wanted a scroll wheel, you can get one for 2 cents anywhere. So the question is, why would you invest in some brand new parts for a product like this? And so they really had a vision, a long-term team, and we're really open to doing something fun. And so that type of energy was something that then also influenced the product team and all the other projects that they did. And then 3 thinkers about this. So this is kind of, to me, the future. This woman is Aisha Bursell from New York, and she does life design, which I think is really interesting, but she has this whole program about deconstruction and reconstructing, and deconstructing your values, and then looking at what you do on a daily basis and lining those up, and helping you figure out if you're actually achieving what it is that you value. And so trying to kind of help people reflect on what it is that they're doing and create their own glue and their own sense of self-centeredness is a big piece. Another good example, I think, is Jane McGonigal, who's the game designer who talks about the idea of making things fun. And she has a disdain for the word gamification because she thinks that it implies that the thing itself is not fun. And so she's like, let's actually make things that are fun and not try to gamify things that are not. And so by building systems as though you're building games and designing, social systems and cultural systems within a company around game-like theories can actually help you make work fun. And then the last one is Breen Brown, who is a woman in Texas that talks about vulnerability and the importance and difference between courage and bravery, and the idea that you can only really be courageous if you really do it with your whole heart and you present your own vulnerability. And I think that that's one of the things that within a company, in order to do something that's really infectious and fun, it really takes your own vulnerability to throw yourself out there, and being able to teach people this and have people reflect on this in a corporate environment is something that's really interesting, and she has a great number of books about this too. So to me, these kinds of thinkers will help shape corporate cultures in the future and make us all a little bit more fun and brave. So that's it. Thanks.